Good Tuesday morning, everybody. Welcome into your FreightWaves Now Community Spotlight on this Tuesday. I'm Kaylee Nix. We are joined by the one and only Mary O'Connell on this lovely Taco Tuesday. Mary, it technically is Taco Tuesday because today we're talking about cross-border freight from Mexico, so it all pulls together, right?
It does. I don't know if the taco was technically born in Mexico. That's something that I'll have to investigate for next time. But I do know that it was born in Latin America. I'm sure many countries take credit for it, just like everybody likes to take credit for hummus. So I like to think that this is a super special, like authentically themed Taco Tuesday this week.
There we go. And we are talking today about Mexico, of course, in the context of cross-border freight and companies specifically choosing to locate there to avoid paying some of those costly tariffs that we slap on them, specifically goods coming from China. Talk to us a little bit about why Chinese companies have so suddenly decided that Mexico is the place to go.
Well, much like everybody has decided that Mexico is the place to go, China has as well. And it's interesting because, Mexico and China aren't necessarily known for being friends. They've kind of had a more of a rivalry, if you will. So it's very interesting now that they have opened up their borders and said, come one, come all, set up shop here, we'll take it. So it's really just proven that, Mexico is kind of that next step in development, and the nearshoring thing is a very real thing, and everyone is making sure that their products can still get into the hands of U.S. consumers, which, as we know, we are, and it's kind of nice being able to get kind of whatever you wanted delivered really quickly. But it is happening more and more, and as we see more tariffs happen and certain trade restrictions come from certain countries, there's always going to be a way to circumvent that, right? So that is what a lot of Chinese companies are doing, as well as companies over in the UK. So, or not the UK, the EU. They're also kind of setting up shop or looking at some options because it does, reduce that time to deliver. And it also does kind of, help get products to consumers faster, which we can all thank Amazon for the need to want something in 2 days or less.
Yeah, and the conversation around companies nearshoring to Mexico in order to avoid these tariffs isn't necessarily a new one. But what we do want to put it in context of is the impact that we've seen downstream, right, onto your cross-border actual freight movements, and then into the 3PL space, which is what we really care about here on Check Call, and how that has changed to influence it. Your guest today from Redwood, Mexico, we have talked to them a lot before in the past as well, and we know that they have seen just an influx of folks who are setting up shop, both on either side of the U.S.-Mexican border, in order to do some of that freight transport and really make some of those big-time moves and some big-time money. Can you talk a little bit about what the influx of employers and employees that are moving down there really looks like?
Yeah, so there is kind of the one commonality that no matter what happens, if you set up shop down in Mexico or anything, there is still that finite number of Mexican carriers that you're able to kind of do business with, just because, they're growing so quickly that their trucking market hasn't quite caught up yet. So there is some shortage in capacity down there. But the other thing that's really important to remember for most of what's happening in Mexico is that Mexico is still a very relationships-based country. So you can't necessarily just like call up John's Trucking and say, hey, I want you to work for me. I mean, you can, but the chances of getting a yes out of that are a little bit lower versus if you say, hey, John, can you introduce me to George's Trucking? Then more often than not, you're going to be able to do business with that trucking company because you've more or less kind of gotten that like, nah, he's good. Like like the unofficial head nod of like, nah, it's good. So that is something that is very prevalent and common all throughout Mexico. So it really is difficult for some of those 3PLs that don't have a presence in Mexico to start that presence in Mexico. They kind of need someone to come in and say, no, it's okay, they're good, or like that they need to know a guy who knows a guy, for lack of a better comparison. And so that's something that a lot of people are struggling with or could potentially struggle with. But, there are companies that have been down in Mexico for the last 20 years. And then there are also some 3PLs that if they aren't confident or if they're just kind of starting to attempt to maybe do business in Mexico, they're working at the border border with on the U.S. side of picking up stuff from those companies and kind of serving or picking up from that, customs brokerage location or some of those warehouses just on the other side of the border. They're doing that half of the leg. So there really is a place for everyone. It's just a matter of making sure that you position yourself to be at the right place at the right time, mostly.
So that's a good point to bring up. And also, when we're talking about it in the context of kind of how the freight market has continued to be in this down cycle and the stress that it's put on some folks who are maybe looking for jobs in this space, right? When we're talking about the opportunities that are afforded if you are working with a carrier or a brokerage that has a really good US-Mexico presence, you have an opportunity to maybe move into those areas that can help sustain your employment as a broker, or even look for your next big move getting over into a space like that. When we're looking at what opportunities look like coming up, obviously, of course, all eyes are on the presidential election and what that would mean for continued tariff policy. There really was not a big change between Biden policy versus Trump policy when it came to these Chinese tariffs. Do we think that we could see a change, though, if we see President Harris or potential President Harris be elected?
I think I have not followed what potential tariffs she could potentially enact between the US and Asia. I've not particularly followed that closely, or I don't know if she's even really announced it, but I would assume it would kind of fall in line with everything that we kind of have right now. So I would say that, we're going to continue to see that strong import demand on the West Coast. We're going to continue to see companies setting up shop in Mexico. And I think right now, the biggest attention is kind of on that cross-border thing because all the infrastructure kind of grew up and everybody decided at once that it was time to move down to Mexico and set up shop. But naturally, the actual border crossing is still kind of lacking in some of these updates, and there's just still kind of struggling to accommodate some of this demand. So specifically going from Mexico into the U.S., there are those really long wait times. And so I think the biggest kind of advantage or the biggest thing that's going to happen there is we need to kind of beef up that process and make it easier for those trucks that are doing business to obviously carry on and do their business, because nobody really wants to sit for 2 hours at the border waiting to drive to the other side. So I think that I would be surprised if there's a significant change in the tariff situation, but I do continue to expect kind of that the U.S., Canada, Mexico, basically the thing that replaced NAFTA, the USMCA, that I would expect that to continue to be strong. And so I would expect a lot of top trading partners to remain on the North America part of things.
I would absolutely agree with that as well. Mary, thank you for joining us this morning for a community update. For folks who want to catch Check Call the show or Check Call the newsletter, where can they go to do that?
If visuals are your thing, you can check out Check Call coming out today at 12:30 Eastern on YouTube. If listening's more your thing, you can catch it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or honestly anywhere else you get your podcasts. And if reading is your style, well, you can subscribe to that on freightwaves.com/checkcall. And that newsletter will be coming out today at 2 p.m.
And then, of course, if you subscribe to that Check Call newsletter, hey, you're going to get a sweet little promo code in your inbox that will give you a little discount to our Future of Freight Festival. Tickets are going fast and they are going hot, so make sure that you get one before it's too late. We want to see you guys here in November the 19th through the 21st.
And I will say that the Check Call discount code, it might be the cheapest way to get a ticket. I'm just saying.
I don't know. No promises made, but you've got to subscribe to find out. Thanks for joining us this morning, Mary. We'll catch up with you later. Have a great week.